get underway with our first In Conversation session this morning, it gives me great pleasure to welcome to the stage a leader who needs no introduction, but I get the great fortune of giving her one anyway. The first in her family to attend university, Sanna Marin became the youngest Prime Minister in Finnish history and the world's youngest female state leader. She's encouraged new approaches to the future of work, to social services and gender equity in her country and inspired them throughout the world. During the government formation talks in 2019, Marin chaired the negotiating table that addressed the theme Carbon Neutral Finland that protects biodiversity, a theme that ran right throughout her prime ministership, with Finland making extraordinarily ambitious and world-leading commitments to taking their government and their country carbon neutral. Marin's government was considered one of the most successful in handling the COVID-19 pandemic, especially when it comes to lives lost and economic damage caused by the pandemic. Following the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Marin led her country through the most swift NATO accession process in the whole history of the alliance. Extraordinary. In addition to these two historical challenges, Marin's government passed many progressive reforms. As I said, the most ambitious climate laws aiming for carbon neutrality by 2035, family leave reform, sharing paid leave with both parents equally, as well as major reforms to improve healthcare, education, and human rights. Without further ado, can you join me in welcoming to Energy Disruptors, Sanna Marin. Welcome, welcome. So great to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
We are so thrilled to have you. Have you been to Calgary before?
Well, actually, I've never been to Calgary, and unfortunately, we are only here for a short visit, but I've been, of course, in Canada many times, so visited other places, but I'm very happy to be here today.
Well, we are glad your first stop in Calgary ever is here with us at Energy Disruptors. I feel like, as I mentioned in your introduction, one of the things I think about when I think about your prime ministership is leading through crises. You had the challenge of the pandemic. I mentioned the Russian invasion of the Ukraine. I was wondering maybe if you could take us back to that day in particular where you found out the invasion was happening, and whether you could talk to us about what you learned as a leader about navigating crises and leading through uncertainty, because that was an extraordinarily challenging and uncertain moment for not only you as Prime Minister, but for your nation.
Well, that's true. And I was Prime Minister during a period of time where everything happened, like all the major crises, global pandemic, war in Europe, leading Finland to NATO. And I'm very happy that you also mentioned all the political work that we did within our government. And I think part of being a leader and leadership, it's not only how do you manage crisis, but how do you actually get all the other things done at the same time. I'm very proud that we were able to fulfill 98% of our governmental program, even though everything else happened. And we did make some great reforms on education, on parental leave, for example, and the climate laws that you also mentioned. But I do vividly remember the night that we learned, or very early morning that we learned.
How does it happen? Do you get a phone call? How do you find out?
Well, actually, when Russia invaded Ukraine, we knew before that it would be very likely that this will happen within 12 hours during that night or very early in the morning. So we had the intel, but of course every one of us leaders hoped to the very second, to the end, that it wouldn't happen, that it would be some kind of drill, it would be part of negotiation tactics from Russia, that they wouldn't eventually then attack Ukraine. But I learned that very early in the morning. I think it was 5 or 6 o'clock or something, and my security knocked my door and said, like, now it's happened. But we did have the intel before, and I was devastated. And the whole, like, the air felt so thick during those hours when we were all waking up to the harsh reality, what has just happened. It was like hours later that we convened with European Council together in a meeting to make sure that the sanctions were in place and to make some kind of plan, what do we do now. But it's been horrible situation ever since, and of course we try to help any way we can to give arms support, financial support, humanitarian support, put more and heavier sanctions to Russia. But unfortunately there is still war going on and people are losing their lives every day, and Ukraine is fighting for all of us, all of our values in the front line right now, and it's just devastating.
Now, not many of us can necessarily relate to receiving phone calls like that, but the idea of finding yourself in a complex and uncertain situation is probably relatable for most leaders in the room. As someone faced with the challenge of thinking, how do I lead my country through this? What did you lean on from a decision-making standpoint? How did you approach getting the information and sort of walking your way through that step by step? Because is there any lessons that we can learn as leaders? Because I feel like we're constantly talking at the moment about how do we lead through uncertainty. It's probably one of the biggest themes and equally one of the most confounding challenges facing all of us here in this room today. What advice have you got for how we can be more effective at navigating that?
Well, I think the first step is to admit and accept that there is uncertainty and that you cannot plan on things. You have to react when things happen, and you have to also be able to change your strategies and change your views and get new information and absorb that information. And I think one of the reasons why Finland were so effective handling COVID, global pandemic, was the reason that we, as leaders, we had 5 parties within the government, all led by women. 4 of us were under our 40s. We were accepting the fact that we didn't know that much about the pandemic, about the virus from the get-go, but still we had to make bold decisions. And when we got new information, we changed our strategy, and we really were able to admit that we were wrong doing that, and now we will change that. And I think that is the number one lesson that I've learned, and number one advice that I would give, is that accept that there is uncertainty and then learn from it and gather and collect and accept also new information and change your strategies if things change.
I wanted to ask you about that because I mentioned obviously in introduction, youngest ever Prime Minister of Finland, for a time the world's youngest leader, full stop, certainly the world's youngest female head of state. There's this element of you can't be ready for that, right? To truly have been prepared, and I think readiness is a myth. I think so often we hold ourselves back on the illusion that we're waiting for the ducks to line up or things to be perfect, and in reality there's no such thing as ready. We just have to give ourselves the push to start before we're ready. But I'm interested, how did you deliberately set up structures? Because Peter finished with a slide up where he said he wants to challenge us all to do something we've never done before, which is one of those things that's easier said than done. What structures did you set up, or how did you support yourself to actually step into a role where there's so much that you hadn't done before, where you had to admit there was uncertainty facing you? Did you lean on mentors? Did you think about the intentional kind of diversity of people you surrounded yourself with? Or what was really helpful to the effectiveness of your leadership?
Well, even though I was first youngest Prime Minister at the time, and I'm still quite young as a politician, as a leader, but still, I've been in politics for 20 years, so I started quite early, and I've been within my party and within the parliament and been minister before, so I wasn't a rookie, even though I was young. And it helps that you know the political processes, and you know the people, and you know also all the key people and the institutions that you have to work with. And especially during the crises, whether it was COVID or whether it was the war in Ukraine and the Finnish NATO process, together with Sweden at the same time, I think the key element was also to make sure that every key actor were involved handling those situations, because you never lead alone. You always lead with people, and you always lead people, so you need to make sure that people know that what is happening and that they know that they are part of the process, and you also enable them to fulfill their part of the solutions that we have to make and the decisions that we have to make. For example, during the NATO process, we worked with so many institutions, but also key actors like the government, the president, the parliament, the official institutions, but also parties within the parliament, parliamentary groups, parties that had to change their decisions concerning NATO accession. And so we worked with so many key actors. And the same thing with COVID. You had to work within several levels, not only nationally with your government and with the health institutions and the health professionals, but you had to work with regions and cities and communities, and you had to lead those different processes, because actually also the decision making, especially during COVID, that was civil society or societal crisis, not like war that has like those kind of structures, but it was a disaster pandemic that hit every level of our societies. So you actually had very scattered decision making. Some of the decision makers were in the city level, some were regional level, some did government made, some were decisions that were made by authorities from the medical side. So it was very difficult to handle and to lead those processes where you have so many actors and you have to make sure that the whole orchestra is trying to play the same song, even though everybody has their own angle and own views on things.
You mentioned that you'd been in the system for 20 years, which is a pretty remarkable feat in and of itself. You've also been someone who's really pushed and challenged the way the system works. And one of my favourite quotes of yours is that the strength of a society is not measured not by the wealth of its most affluent members, but by how well its most vulnerable citizens are able to cope. That was something you said in your speech right when you were elected. And it made me reflect on that's really not how we measure success at the moment, is it? Do you think we need to, at this moment in time, when there's so much uncertainty, when we feel like we're at an inflection point and a challenging point in so many ways, do we need to be challenging what we're measuring?
Well, I do believe that the societies are as strong as its weakest members, and I think this is also a big part, maybe the most central part of Nordic welfare model, to be able to make sure that everybody have possibilities in life, that every child will get very good education any way up to the university level, whether your background is poor or whether you come from any part of your country. So everybody has those opportunities in life and everybody can make their own paths in life. So I think and I do believe that that's the most important thing. And actually, the Nordic welfare model is also something that enabled us to build trust over the decades that were so valuable, especially during those difficult times and uncertainty and crises. If you have that basic trust within your society, then it's so much easier to also make difficult decisions. Because people want to participate, they feel that they are part of the society and they want to fulfill their own part. So I think the basic trust that it's built not over days, but actually over decades, making sure that everybody has possibilities and everybody feels belonging to the nation. I think that is crucial. And whether we are in politics or within society, in the public, or whether we are in business, I think that building up the basic trust is the most important thing that also helps us, and especially helps us in the situations where things get really tough and when there is uncertainty and when there is very difficult decisions to be made.
And you're sort of an outlier to what we've seen broadly globally, right, where the decline in trust across all manner of institutions has been so sharp and so striking over recent periods of time. I love your call out around belonging there as well. I've not ever heard us talk about the idea of how we might measure a sense of belonging and connection to our nations in a meaningful way. The other thing I wanted to ask you about Finland, two things that are really striking when you start researching Finland. One, you're a happy bunch, right? Yeah. You consistently top the world's happiest places, which is quite incredible. And equally, I learned about this part of the national character. Tell me if I'm saying this correctly. Sisu? Sisu. Can you talk to us? What can we learn from the generally glass half full approach of Finns? How can we fill ourselves with a little bit more of that optimism? And equally, can you tell us about what Sisu means?
Well, of course I can tell you. Finland has been rated, I think, 10 years in a row, the world's happiest nation. And of course, it doesn't measure cheerfulness. We are not the most cheerful people. I think your fellow Canadians can understand and relate that we also live up in the north, very cold and sometimes very humid climate, and people, especially during the winter time, people are always like this. So we are not the most cheerful people in the world, but there's like deeper kind of happiness within our society because we have those opportunities for everybody. We have very good daycare system, good schooling system, educational system. We have those structures to social benefits and social and health care, and people have the trust that if something will happen to me, then the society will take care of me. And I think that's very important that you will have that kind of trust. And I think also the happiness comes from the fact that people feel that trust and they feel belonging to our country. And for example, when we look also different measures, one very interesting is that when we ask different citizens in different countries, how willing you are to defend your own country, Finland ranks #1.
Really?
Yeah, because of our history. And also because of our aggressive neighbor. We are next to Russia. We have the longest border together with Russia, over 1,300 kilometers. And we have had very, very bloody and
that would probably
very
be
hard history with them. So that's one part.
Be a reason people would think maybe you're not the happiest country on earth.
So we are very willing to defend our own country, but also I think it's to do with the belongingness and that you feel that you're part of the society and you have that basic trust within your society. So also the happiness index, it measures this kind of like deeper happiness, not cheerfulness. And what sisu means, it actually means that even when things are really tough, you will cope through that together. It feels like guts, that you have guts to do things and that you will go through a solid rock if you need to, just to make sure that things is to get done. So we come from very harsh climate and very difficult background, so I think Finnish people have sisu, so we can cope through anything together.
So very much like a resilience
Very
trait.
much to do with resilience. And I think Finland is also the #1, well, maybe, I'm not sure, there's no measures about this, but I would say that Finland might be the #1 country for preparedness. Also, we are very prepared on different kind of situations, and we take it very seriously that we will cope whatever comes to our way.
Fascinating. I want to ask you about two other things too. Peter talked about the sort of 50 years of innovation of the light globe in the opening presentation, and I was thinking about the parallels with the Finnish journey. Finland was one of the world's poorest countries at the end of World War I, and a century on, you are frequently atop of the the European Commission's Digital Economy and Society Index. You're ranked #1 for digital competitiveness in 2019. It's amazing watching how highly ranked and competitive your economy is now, given the challenging starting place you came from a century ago. And I think there's lessons for all nations represented in this room today around, from a policy standpoint, from a public-private partnership standpoint. What have you done? What has enabled that innovative spirit to flourish in Finland over the last few decades in particular?
Well, over 100 years ago, we were a very poor agrarian country that has always been under somebody's power, under Russia's power, under Swedish power. So we were a very poor country. And two things why we are now ranking #1 is education and equality, and especially gender equality. Because we are a small country, we only have 5.5 million residents. We are big in land, but we only have 5.5 million residents in Finland. So we were always a small nation, and we didn't have that kind of natural resources like gas or oil or those kind of like things that some other countries had. We had our people, very few, and then we had a lot of forests, but still not the kind of natural resource than some other. So we had to make sure that we will educate everybody. We didn't have the luxury to lose some part of the population, so we have to make sure that we are educating every single people in Finland, whether they are male, female, come from different places, different backgrounds, and I think education, especially coming from a very early childhood, good daycare system that is part of the schooling system, not like somewhere that you take your kid when parents go to work, but actually very big part of our schooling system. And then a very good educational system, free on tuition up to the university level. And for example, during our period in government, we decided that our aim is to boost up our research and development investments up to 4% by the year 2030.
What was it when you started?
Well, much less. I think it was about 2 or 3.
Okay, so significant increase.
Significant increase by the year 2030. So we know that we don't have the single market our own. Of course, we are part of the European single market, but we are a small country and small nation. So we do need everybody involved. It must be the Russia. Or then it's the fire alarm or something.
I am told they've been having a bit of a challenge with the venue, so hopefully this will be solved in a moment. Apparently the fire alarm's been going off a little bit over the course of the last week, and they haven't been able to get a handle on it. So I'm going to presume until we're told otherwise that we're okay. And as frustrating as it is to try and persist while we're having that sound going, we will do our best to continue and make the most of the conversation we have. So forgive me for the background music.
That's very nice. Now I can see you all, because it's not black anymore, so I can see
Everyone have
the
a wave.
audience. Hi.
Maybe actually we should seize this moment. Should we take a class photo with everyone behind us?
Yeah, sure.
Now that we can see you all and we can check if you're blinking, I'm going to take a photo while you're all in view. All right, everyone ready to smile? No blinking at the back, all right? I can see you.
Yeah.
Ready? Smile, say EDU. Oh, and look at that, we ended the fire alarm.
Yeah.
Team, well done. I love it.
Maybe it was planned.
Brilliantly done, everyone. That was your collective willing for that to stop. So thank you for making that possible. I want to come on to climate, if I can, because it's the issue that brought you into politics, and it was from a frustration of just noticing, particularly a generational divide, that there wasn't really an engagement around the issue. You described it as our generation's Berlin Wall. I'm interested around what you've learnt about building intergenerational traction and engagement around issues like climate, and maybe extending that out to the lessons you've learned about effective communication and storytelling. How do you bring an entire nation on a journey with you?
Well, I was about 20. It was 2006 when I thought that maybe it is my time to also go to politics, because when I was young, when I was a teenager, I never could have imagined being part of politics or pursue a career in politics, because it looked like older men in grey suits, nothing that I could relate to. So I never thought that I would go into politics, but I also always felt so passionate about issues, especially human rights, equality, rights for minorities, but also climate, loss of biodiversity, loss of natural resources that we are using too much. So I felt so passionate about the issues, and then I thought that it's not only my possibility, but it's actually my responsibility to do something. And this is a message that I also want to send to the younger generation, that it's your responsibility. Don't wait that somebody else will save the world, be the change that you want to see in the world. So I wanted to participate, and I entered my political party and movement when I was about 20. And it was very frustrating, because I didn't think that climate were on the top of the list of things that we have to solve, even though it's the most burning issue of the globe. So I always felt very passionate about climate issues and also environmental issues. And I think that if we don't solve these things, and it's not only that I think, like it's a fact, it's a scientific fact, that if we don't solve these issues, then nothing else matters. Like, we can talk about everything, but if we lose this battle, we don't get a second turn, and we don't have another planet where we could live. So I think it's a crucial one, and I'm very happy that now it's more on the table. But what is the thing is to also to fulfill all the goals and the targets that we have set up together. Finland has the most ambitious climate targets.
2035, right?
2035. Just within 10 years, we want to be climate neutral. And the way to do this, it's not only by public decision-making and politics, because we need all the private businesses, industries on board. And this is crucial. So we actually made, together with the different industries, these roadmaps themselves.
So and collaborated on it.
Yeah, and they participated very heavily, that every main industry, whether it's steel or forest or you name it, they made their own roadmaps, how they will achieve that 35 goal that is so ambitious. And we are in the same boat in Finland. We have this common understanding and knowledge that this is crucial from the climate point of view, but we also know that we are a small country and we cannot solve the climate issue ourselves. So, of course, there's also other targets involved. And because of our educational system, we are very good at innovating things, and we know that we are not a big market our own, so we all want to sell things abroad. So of course we also see that big business opportunity, that if we can make the climate solutions and solutions for the environment, there's a big market out there. So of course we want to boost our economy, and we want to boost our jobs on green transition and digital transition. So that's why also the private sector, the industries and the businesses are very keen and focused on solving these issues. So I think it's a win-win.
Fantastic.
Win-win on economy, win-win on jobs, and then, of course, for a good cause, saving the climate and creating those solutions that we all need.
Just to give everyone an assurance, I know you probably couldn't hear the announcement, it was in my ear. We're all good, so we don't need to worry. False alarm, which was anticipated, unfortunately the case, so we can all rest easy on that front. Sanna, if I can just ask a follow-up question to that, what's your message then to the rest of the world who maybe don't share Finland's ambition and kind of level of sort of single-minded drive towards that goal?
Well, I don't think we have any other choice. And I think the change is inevitable. And it's smart to be in the front line. And this is, I meet a lot of people in the private sector in different kind of businesses. And what do I say to them? Like, be smart. Like, this is the thing that is happening. And be prepared beforehand. Or otherwise, in the future, you will lose your jobs, you will lose your industry, you will lose your leverage, and you will lose your customers. Like, be in the front line and make the change now and really benefit also out of it. And if you don't, there will be others that will come and take your place in that private private business sector. So be smart.
Get on board, be smart.
Yeah.
I'm also interested you're someone who thinks and has spoken a lot about technology, and no doubt in the geopolitics panel we'll get a bit more into AI. But now in the context of climate, we know that technological advances alone won't solve it. There's a key piece that policy plays, and you mentioned it there, government can't do it alone, we need to be in partnership. How does that relationship between policy and technology need to look to be able to see the pace of implementation that we need to achieve ambitious targets like Finland's?
Well, I believe in cooperation, and I think public and private partnership and cooperation, discussing dialogue, it's a key thing. Because new technologies are invented and are developed in such a rapid pace that we've never seen before. So the policymakers and the legislators within the European Union or in North America, in Canada, in the US, we are lacking behind. And if we don't understand the technologies, I'm not an expert on technologies, I'm an expert on policymaking, but if we don't know and if we don't understand what we are regulating, then we are regulating the wrong things. We are always late. When the regulations are in place, we are already a few steps ahead with the technologies. So I would say it's crucially important to have that kind of a dialogue and understanding. And also like the, how would you say, you need to be, you need to have that, like, I don't know, how do you say it in English, like...
Give me some context.
You need to be, I don't remember the word, but,
that's okay.
But anyway, you have to be very into it. You have
committed?
Committed, not committed.
Not quite? Okay.
Yeah, whatever. But still, but you need to have that kind of curiosity about new things as a politician. And I think there are so many people, whether they work in European Commission that makes the legislation or prepares the legislation for European Union or in here, I think there are so many policymakers that are actually doing good things, and they want to do good things, and they want the private businesses to succeed, but do they have the tools and the know-how and the right setting and the conversation with these key players on the technology side? I think that's the crucial part. So I would recommend cooperation, engagement, honest dialogue, looking also at all the problems that we might have with the new technologies on ethical matters and societal standards and values, and have a good, honest discussions everywhere we can and try to understand the different sides, because I think technology can save us also with climate, but only if we have the right setting to that technology.
I love the call out for cooperation and collaboration there. It gets the very heartbeat of what we're all about here at EDU. I want to ask you about the challenge of that though, and particularly in the context, you have thought a lot about and written a lot about extremism and kind of the rise of populism. And I want to put a quote that you said that really struck me. You said, "I think when you have hopelessness and when you feel that you are mistreated, then you're trying to find answers in your life. And populist parties give simple answers to complicated questions." Now that's very tempting In an age of complexity where we often feel overwhelmed, it can be easy to search for simplicity. How do we avoid that temptation? How do those who maybe are truly contending with the complexity fight against the convenience of a simpler answer that probably misses the mark on the reality it's trying to deal with?
Well, populistic parties and populistic movements, they have always lived out of fear of people and trying to intimidate people with the harsh words. So there has always been this kind of logic of intimidating people, making people be afraid, and then giving them some kind of solutions that are not solutions. It's usually like, look, there's somebody different there, let's hate him. Like, it's usually like that. And I think we're living in a world where there is actually two wars going on. The global war of values that we're seeing, more and more authoritarian countries are actually questioning the whole rule-based order that we set up together in UN after the Second World War. So there's this big fight on values, and Ukraine, the war in Ukraine, is a forefront of this big fight on values. But authoritarian countries are questioning the whole rule-based order. They are selling their own values, especially when we look, for example, the Global South. So there is this big war on values going on. But then there's another war within democracies, within our countries, that is very disturbing. And it's to do with, of course, elections and the political processes. We are seeing more and more false news, fake items, artificial intelligence has been played part of this. And for example, when we look at certain European elections, for example, in Slovakia just over a year ago, there were like 400,000 false news articles and informational piece flooded in the social media just a couple of weeks in September. And that just gives you a clue, the idea, what is happening also during our political processes like elections in democratic countries. And this is a system and surroundings that we have to work in. There was now just elections in Austria. This very right-wing party won the elections. That they are Putinists. They are supporting Russia. So very disturbing things happening in Europe. More and more right-wing, super right-wing populistic parties are winning elections also in Germany. I would never guess during our lifetimes, again, like we were taught and we were educated in schools what happened during the Nazi regime in Germany. And I thought, like, this would never happen again. Like, how could that happen? And this would never happen again. And now there's like far-right Nazi movement parties, AfD in Germany, that is gaining popularity within regional elections. So very, very worrying things happening in Europe, but also elsewhere. So we are actually witnessing war also within the democratic system, that it's populistic, very right-wing, and very troublesome. And what happened in Russia, or what is happening now in Ukraine, the development in Russia, it didn't happen overnight. What happened? It was during 15 to 10 years. First, Russian political leaders, they silenced opposition, the free press, civil society, they put people in jail. So Russia gradually changed into this authoritarian regime that attacked Ukraine, and now we are actually seeing the similar kind of development within democratic countries like Hungary, for example, or these different far-right marches within elections in Europe. And I think this is something that we should really worry about, and also how these movements are using online, social media, fake news, and material that's not real. And the worry thing is also that people are actually sharing things that they know is false, that it's not true, but they are still sharing if it's part of their ideologist's way of thinking. So I think we are seeing also very troublesome things happening within our democracies that we have to take very seriously and try to convince people that there are better paths ahead, and that don't always grasp those like easy answers and the hatred and the fear that people feel, because the world is changing in a pace that we are not witnessed before, and the world is also not that nice place, and people want easy and simple answers, but the world is complex, and I think it's also our responsibility as leaders
to give people hope.
To give people hope and give them pathways, and also understand that their troubles, whether it's the price of gasoline or the price of things that they need in their everyday lives, or housing or education, the things that people worry, we need to take it seriously, and we need to see people and look them eye to eye and understand their fears and their hopes and their dreams and their also the nasty things, the hatred that people have inside of them. And we have to see them eye to eye and try to have the conversations and try to fight this very, very, I would say, from my political view, worrisome movement of far right uprising.
That's great advice there, that we all need to take people's worry seriously, and that it's incumbent on every leader to create pathways and to foster hope in the people that we're working with. We've got the benefit, I should say, shortly as well, that we're going to get into a geopolitical panel where we're no doubt going to come back in a little more depth to the authoritarian part of the conversation, and certainly to exploring Russia and the Ukraine a little bit more. But I wanted to pick up on the two wars you described, the war of values and sort of the war of misinformation attached to elections. And ask you about what that was like to go through as a leader personally. Because you've been a trailblazer your whole life. I mean, you were the first in your family to finish high school and to go to university. You grew up raised by two women in a time when it was decades before marriage equality. You found yourself elected Prime Minister in your early 30s. We often talk about trailblazing, and trailblazing can come at a cost. And I particularly think about coming to power at a time where the social media that you described moments ago got so toxic, attacks became so commonplace. How hard was it navigating that environment as a leader? And what, if anything, have you learned? For people, we're encouraging this boldness, people to step out and say, we need more bold leadership, we need more courage from people like the people here in the room today with us. How can they set themselves up to be successful given that challenging environment they have to work in? What have you learned about how to do it?
Well, I have a thick skin, and I've been politics for a long time.
Does that build over time?
Yeah, and you need to have thick skin when you are in this kind of position. So
what do you practically do, though? How do you?
Well, I always focused on the matters and the issues, and I never really cared about it, the personal things that are online or social media or whatever in traditional news as well. So I always focused on the issues, and I tried to just ignore all the things that you're mentioning. But I really worry about people that don't have that thick skin, that want to just influence societies, that want to be part of our democratic processes, that are raising their voices online, for example. So there are more and more attacks on individual persons, especially when you're female, when you're younger, when you are part of some kind of minority groups, whatever is your background, if you are part of minority, then you are very harshly attacked online.
It makes me think about your comment too about Finland earlier, that you realised as a nation you needed everyone contributing. I feel like a lot of people are not contributing because they're not wanting to put themselves up for attack.
They are treated so badly online, and I think we should have those kind of rules and legislation in place where it would really give people the safe space to participate to our democratic system, because right now, especially when you're a younger female and you are writing, for example, in X or some other social media platform, just your views, just participating or engaging with the discussion, you can be harshly attacked. And it's not like only individuals, those are orchestrated campaigns, and they are also orchestrated from countries that are not democratic, like from Russia, for example. So I think we should really focus on this matter and take it seriously, and we have to protect the space where people can engage, or otherwise we won't have democracies as we have known them anymore in the future. If people are afraid to participate, that's not a good thing for democracies. So I think hate speech, hatred, using online platforms to do this, I think we have to work these things together as legislators, but also with the big tech companies that are in our everyday lives. And we have to create that safe space for people from all kind of backgrounds, because it's very harsh what is happening now. So I don't worry about myself. I have thick skin and I have a lot of knowledge and experience on this. But what about the people that are just ordinary people and are being attacked?
And maybe the other side of the same coin, what's your message to anyone who's sitting in this room today, maybe holding themselves back from making a bigger contribution, whether that's getting into public office, whether that's choosing to speak up more and challenge the status quo in their place of work, whether that's choosing to step out and be more of a disruptor and an innovator in a field like new energy technologies. What's your message to anyone who's holding themselves back from playing a bigger game?
Well, I would like to say, like, just do it. But I know it's very hard on personal level. And I think, and I know that many people are actually wondering these questions very carefully. And I understand that. But if you don't raise your voice, then somebody else will. And if you don't tell your values and your views of the world, then somebody else will take that power for you. And we shouldn't take good things like gender equality or all those things that we believe in, human rights, we shouldn't take those things on granted, because it's not. We are taking steps backward every day. On gender equality, human rights, the rule-based order, it's all being questioned constantly. And if we don't defend those things that we believe in, then somebody else will come, take that power, and use it against us. And I don't want to see a future where we will have some kind of very ugly, surveilled systems where people cannot participate and speak and be themselves. So I think we should all take this very carefully, and we should all take this very seriously. I understand the personal level, but just be courageous. We need you, and we need your voices, and we need your views, and we need your values. And please participate, even though I know it might be very hard.
I love that. Great. Yeah, absolutely. We've got only a couple of minutes remaining, and so before we give everyone a moment and we go collect our fellow panellists and come back for a deep dive into geopolitics, I wanted to come back to a comment you made moments ago about how it's sort of incumbent on all of us as leaders to give people hope and give people pathways. And I'm mindful that feels like a very big idea, and I'd love, from your own leadership journey, any practical insights, particularly around the hope piece? Because I think I've heard this conversation coming up a lot with leaders, even in recent weeks. You know, when I don't feel it myself, how do I inspire hope in others? You know, when I look at the news, it feels a little bit doom and gloom. I'm struggling to find hope. Where do you find it? How do you find hope on a daily basis? And how do we as leaders take up your advice to help others find it too?
Well, there's hope in action. There's hope in action. And I'm an optimist in a way. I see the world that it's actually right now quite nasty place, like a lot of bad things are happening, and we are not reacting fast enough. For example, climate change. We're discussing about these matters, but are we taking action fast enough? I don't think so, not right now. So I'm looking at the world that it's actually quite nasty place right now, and I'm very realistic in a way that the world is. But I'm optimistic in a way that if we all realize and look at the world the way it is very realistically, then we can always do better. We can take action and we can do better. And this is something that I believe in. So optimism or hope isn't something that you just have. I think there's hope in action. And I think if you give people tools to act, I think then there's always hope to do better, and there's hope for all of us. A few lessons that I learned as Prime Minister, especially during those very, very difficult years and times and crises that we faced, is the importance of giving people knowledge, engage with them, and even when you don't always have new things to announce. For example, during COVID, we didn't make decisions every day, even though we made a lot of decisions and a lot of new legislation. But still, I got a very good advice of the leader of the parliament during that time, that even if you don't always have something new to inform people, just hold press conferences every day. just to make sure that people know what is going on, what is happening.
To build trust, right?
Yeah, to build the trust. So then people can also look at that, they will have the same information, and they can feel more calm of the situation when they have the information at hand. So even if you don't always have like new things that you want to announce, just make sure that people know where we are, what we are doing, where we are heading, and then they can feel also the calmness in the midst of crisis and when they are afraid and when everything bad seems to be happening and when they are very worried. So I think that was very useful advice that we used, and I think it's a big part of why we were able to handle COVID as well as we did.
Share what you can. Some phenomenal call-outs to kick off our EDU in conversation. You know, the encouragement to use your voice and to defend what matters to you, the importance of getting involved even though it can be challenging, that call to all of the leaders in the room to create pathways and to inspire hope in others, that and so much more. Sanna Marin, it has been an absolute treat having you here at Energy Disruptors. There's more to come, but can you join me to begin with in thanking Sanna Marin for being in conversation?
Thank you.